go. League Season 2 and the public have spoken to trade in one space Egyptian army for another space Egyptian army. It's Thousand Suns. Here we are at the helm of the... I can't remember the number of the Legion. Doesn't matter, because that wasn't wrong, you see. It's very clever. It's a reference to Magnus not doing anything wrong. We don't have Magnus because he's still terrible even. Now, slight also you'll notice that I have my cards here because one, you've activated my trap card, and two, because this is all my psychic powers. I will need them to remember. So this could be very fun for everyone involved. I'm not running Magnus because even with the free strategic reserves, he's basically just going to arrive, kill something, and then die. And he's not worth 420 points to do that, in my opinion. So I know there's been some talk about doing that. Fine. I'm also going to preface this. I'm not using Flamers because, one, we don't own any. Two, this is Thousand Suns, not Thousand Suns and Friends. And also because in our league rules, we're not doing any allies. Because you should win on the strength of your generalship and your army, not whether you can soup good. What we are running is an Arcs of Omen detachment, and we're running them as Cult of Duplicity. So Cult of Duplicity enables me to use Sorcerous Facade. So it's Warp Charge 8, so 7 because of Thousand Suns. And I can teleport around the board, which is very useful indeed. So mobility is obviously very key for any game of 40k. And I'm not the slowest. I am the slowest tool in the shed. But I'm not the fastest tool in the shed. I don't have the grade 4 on my lawnmower. So I need to be teleporting around. Teleporting lawnmower, you do not want that. Right. So, leading up the army is a Daemon Prince. Prince Philip is here himself, and he has... Right, so this is why I've got my card, so I can tell you the psychic powers, so I can discuss my reasonings behind them all. So, here's my Warlord. He doesn't have a Warlord trait, but he does carry Eglagan's Ori, which I'm going to call Eggs Omelette, or Eggs Erroneous. So what this enables him to do is, in the command phase, pick a visible unit of the enemy variety, and I get a 6-inch aura, which allows me to ignore all weapon skill, ballistic skill, hit, wound, and damage modifiers, which is very useful indeed for going in for the kill. And in terms of psychic powers, he has the Weaver of Fates, so he can give a unit -1 to be hit, which is always useful. No, sorry, Weaver of Fates, no. Oh, I've done it wrong, everyone. There we go. Glamour of Tzeentch. I've already messed up and I still have references. 40k, everyone. Isn't it a simple game? Glamour of Tzeentch allows me to do -1 to hit on someone, and he's also got Swelled by the Warp, so I am able to give himself predominantly, but someone else if I really want to, +2 strength and +1 attack, which is very nice because he has the sword, so he will be rocking, if he casts that power, 6 attacks at strength 10, -3, damage free, which is very tasty indeed. Now, the Ori only applies to core units in the aura, so it won't affect him, which is a pity, but never mind, what can you do? I was debating between that and the Conniving Plate, so he would be a little bit tougher with a 2-up save, as well as being able to half attacks against him in combat from models in engagement range, but I decided to try out this one for now. We can always tweak the list, provided that we lose, but so we're never going to tweak the list, because we're going to win 2 for 2, baby. Next up, we have Ahriman, who, despite being a special character, is not the General or the Warlord, because that's not how you do competitive 40k, because his Warlord trait is poo. Although, weirdly, he could be the General and the Demon Prince could run off. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. I might make Ahriman the General because that makes sense. But Demon Prince, would he answer to Ahriman? Look, it's all very confusing narratively. Ahriman has Presage, so +1 to hit, Twist of Fate, the Twist of Fate, which is a wrestling reference for those of you that are like me and Beard and just wish to go back to the early 2000s Attitude era, which basically Twist of Fate turns off an invuln save on a unit, which is very powerful indeed. And he has Weaver of Fates, which is a 4-up invuln save. Now, everything obviously has a 5-up invuln save, but a 4-up invuln save is literally better, statistically, by about 20%. It's more like 16.66666, but rounding up. Let's call it 20. You know, we're all on the same page here. Because books. I have lots of books in Thousand Suns Army. You get it. I'm so good at this. Now, all of those powers that I picked on Ahriman because he innately has a reroll for all of his psychic tests, and those are all quite high warp charges. He's on a disc, of course, so that he can fly around and get into range as well as bring his reroll buffs aura that he brings. We then have an Infernal Master. So, powers-wise, he has 2 Infernal packs that he knows. So he has Malefic Maelstrom, which is +1 strength to a unit's ranged weapons. And he also has the Glimpse of Eternity, which is effectively reroll 1 dice until my next command phase. 1 dice, any dice. So it's a CP reroll, but better, because 1, I don't need to spend CP on it, and 2, it enables me to do it on something like 1 dice of a psychic test, or 1 roll of a mortal wound, or 1 dice on a charge roll. So it gives me a bit more utility. His psychic power is Desecration of Worlds, so it enables him to pick a visible enemy unit within 24, and every time they move, advance, charge, or fall back, I roll a dice for each model in the unit, and on a 6, they take a mortal wound. So against hordes, great. Against small elite units, not so good, but could be useful if I'm not in range for a smite, or I've cast, a bazillion smites already. And then my final HQ, because you're allowed to take 4 now, even though normally you'd be able to do this if you had an Exalted Sorcerer, but I don't. But now I'm allowed to do it because our Arcs of Omen. We have a normal Sorcerer, just in power armor. We've made him a loyal thrall, so he can do a psychic action and cast a psychic power. And we've given him the Seeker After Shadows as a warlord trait. So he can do a psychic action on 3d6 and pick the 2 highest, as well as giving me an extra Cabal point. This is all very, very nice because what it enables me to do is do my psychic actions, which are very important for secondaries, getting me points, and points mean prizes, much, much easier. Now, there's not many armies that have denies here, but I do not want to risk double 1s, okay? I don't want to be spending CP to re-roll that, or having to use my Glimpse of Eternity, or having to take mortal wounds, or failing to get the victory points when I can just spend a CP per game and pretty much guarantee it. So that's my thinking behind that. I could save the CP for something else, but I like the almost guarantee. All right. We just got to backtrack ever so slightly to my Infernal Master because I neglected to mention that he has a Warlord trait and a relic as well. This gives me 2 CP in order to do cool stuff in the first turn. The relic that the Infernal Master has is the Umbralific Crystal, so the Dark Matter Crystal. Another teleport once per game, always useful to have. And he also has Master Misinformator, which enables him to redeploy D3 of my non-vehicle units, which I'll get to in a minute, which is very, very useful for any kind of matchup, in my personal opinion. Anything that gives you a redeploy is very powerful indeed. We will now go back to my normal Sorcerer and tell you about his powers. He's got Baleful Devolution and Perplex. So these are both a bit more of a utility power. Perplex enables me to pick a unit within 24. They cannot shoot a unit that is more than 24 inches away. Could be useful if he's in the mid-board and I want to protect a backfield unit. Baleful Devolution enables me to do some serious mortal wound damage, but only to units that have 11 or more models in them, I think it is. It could be more, it could be less than that. I'm going to have to double check. Oh, it's 6 or more models. Okay, that makes it a little bit more interesting. It's probably not going to come up all that often, but it does make it a little bit more interesting than 11. So that's why I've given him those powers, because he's generally going to be doing a psychic action, so he's got a bit of utility, but both of those powers at the same time, probably not something I want to do. So I'd rather he be doing things like getting me a command point through my Warp Echoes or something like that. We then go over to my troops. We've got 4 units of Rubric Marines. We've got an Icon of Flame in each, which as far as I can tell, you are allowed to put this on the guy with the Soul Reaper Cannon. So the Soul Reaper Cannon carries the Icon of Flame. So he's the last one to die other than the Sorcerer. Now they are only 5-man units, and I know we've lost Armor of Contempt and not received points drops for it, which is upsetting because it does make them not nearly as tough, but fine, we'll have to wear it because we don't have a choice. To do so otherwise would be cheating or playing an old version of the game. And if you want to play an old version of the game, that is absolutely your prerogative, but it's not competitive because you must play up to date. Now, in terms of the powers on these units, we have a little smorgasbord, a board of smorg. We've got, not the wrong power, I've not put these in a very good order. We've got Tzeentch's Firestorm on 1, useful for doing more mortal wounds. So I roll 96 and for each 6, it's a mortal wound, or 5s if I cast it on an unmodified 9, which is very nice. We have Doombolt, a classic, it's basically a smite that always does 3 mortal wounds. Fandabby dozy. We have Cacodemonic Curse, which could be very useful. So a visible? Doesn't need to be visible, that's nice. An enemy unit within 18 is -1 strength on their ranged weapons. could be handy for keeping me alive. And one of them also has Gaze of Hate, so some more pseudo smites useful for mortal woundage. And then we have another unit of Rubric Marines. Now I said we don't have flamers. It's technically a lie. We've got warp flamers. Yes. So we've got a unit of 10. 9 warp flamers. We have a warp flame pistol on the Aspiring Sorcerer. The Aspiring Sorcerer also uses the power Pyric Flux, which enables me to increase the strength of all of those weapons by +1. And we have also given him Ardent Automata, which enables them to shoot and still do an action. That is a bit of it's a niche upgrade. It may not come up. It will depend on my secondaries, which are a bit of a tricky proposition, as we will get to in a moment. But it's useful to have, in my opinion, because it enables me to do things like banners or raise empires, things like that. But again, we'll get to that very shortly. Now, this unit is part of why I've got 2 CP remaining, because with Master Misinformator, I can redeploy a unit. I can also combine this with Risen Rubricite as per the FAQ. Risen Rubricite allows me to set up a unit 9 inches away from the enemy deployment zone or enemy units. Now, some armies will have infiltrators. Fine. But what this enables me to do is I can do it after knowing who has the first turn, because Master Misinformator happens after the first battle round begins, but before the first turn begins. So after seeing the roll-off, I can determine what to do with that unit of rubrics. If I get the first turn, I'm probably going to yeet them forward. They can then move up their 5 inches, burninate everything, maybe do a psychic action on a objective early, and also potentially charge something. So I'm able to tie up things, which is very useful for this army to enable me to get to the mid-board. This is a very mid-board army with all my smite trains. If I don't have the first turn, I can just keep them back. I can redeploy them into safety, but I'm not going to redeploy. I may redeploy them out into the mid-board if I want to play really aggressive or force my opponent's hand. Basically, I've got options, and options are great because options allows you to show off your tactical acumen. You know what isn't very tactical? A brick of 10 Scarab Occult Terminators, because they're really good, and also because they've got Scarabs in their name. So, you know, it's a nice little segue from one MVP to another MVP. So we've got 10 of those. We've got 2 Hellfire Missiles in there, 2 Soul Reapers in there. This unit has Temporal Flux, no? Temporal Surge, sorry, there's Flux and Surge. Surge, which enables them to pick a friendly unit within 6 and move again. So it's specifically a normal move. Yes, so I won't be able to do that if I've fallen back or if I've advanced. Yes. But regardless, what it does is it makes them a wee bit quicker, which is what you want with a slow brick of Terminators. We've also given the Aspiring Sorcerer Protege as an upgrade, because I had a few points spare. And what Protege does is enables him to know an extra power. Not cast an extra power, because that'd be great for 5 points, but know an extra power. So I've given him Dark Blessing, which enables him to roll a single d6 on an enemy unit that I've cast on. It's only a 6-inch range, but if I cast it, I roll above their toughness, they take d3 plus 3 mortal wounds. So it's nice in a pinch if I've used a bunch of smites. If I'm already in combat, because I'm not going to be using Temporal Surge at that point, look, I had the point spare, why not, right? Okay. Rounding off the list is 3 cheeky little Helbrutes. Yeah, I mean, they received a little points drop in the Munitorum Field Manual. They're fine, they're fine. What they bring me is a Multi-Melter, because it's free, a Heavy Flamer in my Power Fist, because it's free, and obviously the Power Fist, which is some nice combat punch. What this then gives me is ways to seed them through the army with some mid-range anti-tank, some close combat support, a bit more anti-horde clearance, as well as a body that has -1 damage and a 5-up inbound save because of Thousand Suns. Yes, they don't get the benefit of the casting, and they can't be teleported around the battlefield. RIP, that would have been fun, but alas. But it gives me something else to potentially divert firepower from my Scarabs, from my Daemon Prince, to act as an escort for my Daemon Prince, to just be a backfield unit that I want my Rubrics to be going off and doing something else, and they're a little bit tougher. It will be matchup dependent, but I quite like them for 105 points. You could make an argument if you're playing with allies that War Dogs are better, potentially, but you're only getting 2 War Dogs for the price of 3 Helbrutes. Yes, the Helbrutes are slower, but they have their 5-up in combat. They're roughly comparable in terms of their combat output. Their shooting is roughly comparable. realistically you're paying for less wounds and being faster, but you're not getting the benefit of being able to cast many powers on them, as well as certain stratagems, as well as the -1 damage. So that's kind of the trade-off that I'm thinking there. That is the list. It is 1997 points. Ugh. Doesn't even divide into 9, which is really sad. I start with 22 Cabal dice. That's a lot of Cabal dice. So there's always going to be some that I'm pretty much always going to do. Extra mortal wounds, getting a CP, being able to auto cast a power against armies that don't have denies when they're super clutch, pluses to cast. Sometimes there's the more niche ones like being able to cast through someone else's line of sight or extra range or double tapping on a Witchfire. So I've got lots of flexibility here. In terms of powers that I've got in backup because of Unholy Sorceress, so I still have access to all the powers in some capacity. I've only got 3. Empiric Guidance I'm probably never going to need to use, plus 6-inch range to rapid fire and heavy. Temporal Manipulation to heal stuff, probably never going to need to use. And Psychic Stalk, which is the best power in the game, but generally pretty worthless because you can't do it on characters or vehicles. Because if you could, it'd be fantastic and the best power in the game. But I've got it if I want to use it with a stratagem to swap it out, as well as being able to swap out other powers as and when I need to. So that's the list. I start with 2 CP, but realistically 0 because I'm probably going to be redeploying. Or if I'm going second, that gives me 3 CP, enabling me to use Unplacable Phalanx, Unwavering Phalanx. The one which is -1 damage on either my 10-man unit of Flamers or my 10-man unit of Scarabs. Yeah, 3 CP is costly, but if that's the difference between losing a Scarab to a Daemon Rust battle tank in every shot, I'm going to spend it. Secondaries, however, is where we hit a bit of a pickle, because the secondaries are not Necron secondaries, they're not very powerful. A lot of people are upset about the loss of Wrath of Magnus, but you need an enemy Psyker in your opponent's army to do that anyway. So it's a bit niche. It was basically an auto win in those niche scenarios, but it's still a bit niche. So I'm not too fussed about that. The ones that I'm pretty much always going to take, let's look at Warpcraft first. Realistically, it's a toss-up between Psychic Interrogation and Mutate Landscape. It's probably going to be Mutate Landscape most of the time, because every mission has 5 objectives on it, and every mission has at least 3 that I'm able to get to relatively easily. So that is pretty much 9 points over the course of the game, which is not a bad innings. Realistically, you're probably looking at almost 6 guaranteed, 9 is extremely doable, and 12 is still very much in the realms of possibility. 15 is a bit trickier, but fine. On the flip side, you've got Psychic Interrogation. That will be matchup dependent, and it has received a bit of a nerf because you need to be able to see them now. So it's very easy to hide certain characters in certain matchups. So that's probably gonna not be used as often. So Mutate Landscape is probably a go-to to tick. My next ones are very matchup dependent, because realistically it will depend on the mission, and it depends on the army, and it depends on the deployment map. Okay, so I'm not going to go through every single mission and every single possible matchup, because that's 9 times 5 permutations, which is a lot. 45 to be exact, just for each mission with a different opponent. Now you've got to times that by another 9. I'm sure someone who's better than maths than I, but you're talking hundreds. It's a large number. Maybe it's 999, which would be actually pretty sweet. I don't think it is. So I won't go through them all, but I'm looking at the ones I'm probably going to take. Weirdly, Behind Enemy Lines is one of those. Because I've got Duplicity, I can teleport stuff. That will net me 3 victory points if my opponent leaves a gap for a unit of Rubrics, as well as netting me a CP, which at the end of the battle round, admittedly, so not always useful. It's still bound by the you can't have more than 1 CP per battle round, but that will free me up from doing things like Echoes of the Warp with my Cabal dice, which gives me a CP on a Warp Charge free psychic action, right? So that's useful to have in my back pocket to go, you know what, I can just do that and get a CP. Grind is a trap, never gonna happen. No Prisoners is very matchup dependent. As we all know, it will depend on what I'm playing against. Assassination, probably not going to come up in this league because most people are only running 2, if not 3 characters. That's a risk. It's a risk. I do have ways of targeting characters with psychic powers, but it's still a risk because you've got to rely on killing them. Right? Bring It Down, again, will be matchup dependent. I'm looking at you over there, Bard, with your Lynn Russes. But again, I've got to kill them. Not the easiest thing in the world for Thousand Suns. So again, probably not a go-to. Raise Banners is a very good option if I don't want to be casting powers or shooting. That's a tricky one because a lot of my oomph comes from psychic powers, but it, again, will depend on the matchup and the terrain layout. So if I wasn't going to be shooting anyway, I'll probably raise a banner. I was looking at retrieve battlefield data, but then I remembered that you can only teleport after the movement phase, so it's not useful to teleport them to do it to maybe get some points later. I'd have to use my Umbrellific Crystal. Might not want to do that early doors. Again, super matchup dependent. Do you see a running theme here? It's almost like my secondaries will change on a whim, for they are fickle. You get it, everyone? So that's that. There's Sorcerous Prowess, which is kill stuff in the psychic phase. Now, there's only one army which has other psychic units, so I will be getting 2 victory points for killing a unit in the psychic phase. Tough one. Very tough one. Now, against something like a vehicle-heavy army, bring it down's better because I can kill them with shooting as well. Against armies which don't have vehicles, that might be an option if I can whittle them and then kind of finish off a bunch in a turn. Like, I could rack up really high on that. I could also do nothing with that. It's probably not going to be used. We also have Burn Empires, which is a real tricky one to use because it's an action that can be done by multiple infantry non-character units. Again, we're sacrificing shooting, we're sacrificing psychic, we're sacrificing combat. These are all quite big asks. And it doesn't score until the beginning of my next command phase or the end of the battle. So it's actually quite a good one if you go second and you somehow have stuff alive. But you do score 4 victory points for doing it, and multiple units can do it. So again, depending on the mission, if I can get like 2, if not 3 of those done early with relatively little retaliation, that could net me a bunch of points. So you see the problem that I have here, guys. None of these are like auto takes, which is a good thing. Don't get me wrong. Necron secondaries were silly. But it does mean that I cannot give you a clear cut, this will happen in every single mission. Mutate Landscape is probably going to happen the majority of the time, but the others are really going to be dependent. Now, obviously, you guys may not have seen other league lists at this point. You may have done. I don't know the complete specifics of everyone's list because then I'd be tailoring, and that's cheating. Naughty, naughty. No tailoring, please. But I can probably guarantee that Bard is taking a lot of tanks. I can guarantee that Stig is taking a lot of infantry. Spider's probably taking a mix. Votan are an elite army. So things like no prisoners bring it down are not autos, and they never were. They're always matchup dependent. Psychic Prowess, the same goes. It realistically comes down to behind enemy lines. I'm not sure. I'm not sold on engage. I'm not sold on engage because I'm not quite quick enough, even with teleports, to really rack up the points in engage. So if I was to tell you right now what it would be, it's probably, like if you said you've got to write them down on your army list, it would probably be Mutate Landscape. It would probably be, I literally just said it, behind enemy lines, and it would probably be Psychic Prowess. Now, I know I just said I'm not sold on that one, but that enables me to soften up units and then kill them. If you were going in blind, but I'm not going in necessarily blind because you get to choose it at the beginning of the mission. So I've kind of got 2 autos and then a flex choice, but realistically it's more like 3 flex choices because, hey, I gotta make things difficult for myself. So that's the list. Those are my choices, those are the reasonings behind my choices, and those are my secondaries and the reasonings behind those. Bit of a long one, but there's a lot to talk about here. But it should be very fun because I'm active in every phase. I've got lots of decent shooting. I've got lots of great psychic. I've got good combat prowess. I've got surprising amounts of speed. And if I'm being perfectly honest, there's not a lot of armies that can withstand the mortal wound output the Thousand Suns can do if you let them. So the onus is going to be on my opponent to deny my teleports and stop me from getting up close, because if they do, and I am, you know, able to cast the smite trains, pretty much whatever's in front of me is dead. But let me know what you think. Is there a glaring mistake that I made? Remember the limits of what we have, right? So we don't have like 40 Scarab Occult Terminators, not that you could run those anyway. We've only got 15, so I know like 2 bricks of 10 is a common one in Duplicity. Have I gone too heavy on the Relics and Warlord traits? Are they necessary? Am I making some wrong choices in power? Should I be doubling up for some redundancy? Is Magnus actually a sleeper hit? All these things and more you can discuss at great length in the comments section below. Let me know your thoughts, Thousand Suns fans. Let me know if there's a glaring weakness in this, if there's a glaring strength, how you would counter this army, what you would do. Like, you know, let's get that conversation going. Like, bring the competitive minds in a melting pot together and let me know. Now, remember again, no allies, and we could only change lists if we lose. So don't immediately tell me to change it, because you'll have to wait a bit for that, because I'm not going to lose any games. So there you go. I'll lose my last game in the qualifiers after I've already qualified, so I can change it going into the semi-finals, because that will then take me through to the finals and win me the belt once. Where's my belt? Oh no, I've made a terrible error. We're going to have to refilm the whole thing, because I need to be wearing the belt the entire time. Until next time, everyone, I have been the chef, you have been bosses, and we will see you in the league.